You know, when you go to a Vikings game, every other game that you're at, they give you some kind of apparatus. We got this probably about 8 years ago. And I've got a whole host of things I could have been very unfathomable to you about the different things that we've gotten. Today, what I'm going to do is basically expand upon what I did yesterday or last week, I guess. Okay, Minnesota Vikings version 2. Oh.
Share screen. There we go. We'll get there.
You got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Stadiums for the Vikings, 61 to 81, the good old Met Stadium, which now is the Mega Mall. And if you go to the lower level, you can find the original Minnesota Twins home base. 1982 to 2013, the Metrodome. 14 and 15, University of Minnesota TSF Stadium. The reason they were there was this is when they were constructing the new stadium. So from 2016 to present, this is where we've been making our home as a very interesting, fantastic fans. Here is basically one of the more unusual things that happened to the Metrodome. It collapsed on 12/12 of 2010. And basically, my good friends, what happened was that there was so doggone much snow on the roof. It fell in, and you will see right here, it ripped a big hole in, deposited a whole bunch of snow on the ground. Here, actually, one of the maintenance men happened to have a camera, and he happened to see the snow come through, was wondering, what's going to happen to me? He was a very nervous man. And this picture right here is showing a bunch of the staff, or I should say they paid people to go on the edge of the stadium and scoop the snow off. This year was shortly after this happened, and they decided, since they had to rip the floor up, what they ended up doing was they put brand new grass in. And of course, being an infamous Vikings fan, I decided to have to buy the hunt. This thing come in the mail. My wife opened up. What the Sam H did you buy damn grass for? I says, it's famous. It's grass out of the stadium. And she still, to this day, she really wonders why I spent 25 lousy bucks on that, but it's part of the history and I can talk about it. Okay, this year was the University of Minnesota Stadium. And at the end of the red arrow, which is right there, this is where our tickets were. And what they tried to do at the TCF was to make sure that we were very close in proximity to where our tickets were. Our tickets at that time were 90 bucks. And one of the things that was interesting was they compared what the weather was like at the old Met to the University of Minnesota Stadium, and unbelievable. If you take a look at the months, they were very, very close. But being hardy Minnesotans, we would all bundle up and we would crawl in there. The only problem is that they had, some parts of it had benches, and that's where I was at. So what you wanted to do is you always wanted to get to the stadium early to get your spot, because if you got there late, you probably were not able to get to sit down, which is the very same thing at Lambeau Field. Okay, this was one of the things that we got a number of years ago. On the flip side was this year, and this was one of the deals. What they wanted us to do at the signal was sit there and shake it around. And what was kind of neat was they would go around the stadium and they would zero in on you. Of course, there's always paraphernalia that they give you. Who would not be a good Vikings fan if you didn't have your koozie? You didn't have your water bottle. And then, of course, they've got these souvenir cups that they charge an arm and leg and then some for soda or for beer. Training camp 2022. I would be remiss if I did not talk about that. This happens to be my son-in-law, little Adriana, who is just finally getting into it. And of course, the biggest fan, as I mentioned last week, is my daughter, Caitlin, and then of course, Victor. She just loves whenever she can get to Victor. And this happens to be Alex's mother. This year happens to be one of the football fields. They've got another one that they essentially practice on. But one of the things that I think is really neat about this particular field here, if they ever have any kids events, if they've got any activities that kids are involved in, you can allow your children to go down. And probably the neatest experience was 2 years ago when we were there. Caitlin goes down, and once you know, Harrison Smith, number 22, which is her buddy, he's seen her come down and she had this little tiny football helmet. He come over and says to her, "So you're a fan of mine?" And she says, "I'm your biggest fan." And she had a little marker, and what he did up in the very top, he signed his name. And what I should have done, I should have had Caitlin bring it. So, and that is probably of all the different things that she has picked up from going to training camp, that is the one thing that she's probably the proudest of. Of course, when you walk in, there's a great big skull, and I have a picture of me leaning on it. But this is what you get greeted with when you walk into the training camp. A beautiful facility. Even if you're not a football fan, I would really encourage you to consider going to take a look at all the different things. They've got a couple of museums. They've got, of course, concessions that are overpriced, just like at the stadium. But it's a neat experience. And for myself and a couple of members of my family being tremendously not unflappable Vikings fans, it's something that we were driving home last year from it, and Caitlin says to me, "Grandpa, are you going to take me to training camp next year?" And I says, "Only if you're good." And anytime she gets a little bit off center, or she's, kind of like this or that, I just say, "Training camp." "Okay, Grandpa. Okay, Grandpa, I will be good." But she really enjoys it, and she's probably a bigger fan than what I am. And then, of course, this year they had these little cutouts, and someone asked her, "How come you got your sunglasses on?" "Oh, just the glare of the Vikings fans, players and everything." So she's always very appropriately well dressed with her sunglasses. And of course, there's good old Adriana, always that nice little blondie hair with that great little smile, looking at us like, "Grandpa, please take my picture." And but that's one thing I'll mention again. One thing that I tremendously appreciate is what the Vikings do for the kids. And the whole philosophy, I asked one of the guys, he said, "Well, Jerome," the guy happened to know, he said, "Jerome, think about it. They are our future fans. And if we get them so enthralled, we get them so interested, guess what? When you're old and gray and you can't come to the games, guess what? I bet you're going to give those tickets to your granddaughter." So it's pretty neat. And of course, here is Caitlin with her little football helmet. She was standing in line waiting for Harrison Smith to sign it. And then this year they got these scattered all through the state training camp, is life-size of various players. And this happens to be her favorite, 22. And someone said, if he's your favorite, how come you got number 19 on? Well, Adam Thielen is my second most player, and that's the one thing about my granddaughter, my good friends. She always has I have a neat little answer if someone asks her. This is probably something that, I mean, most stadiums do it, but this year happens to be one of the times when they've got a huge flag that basically covers the whole stadium and one or the floor. But one of the things that's so neat is everybody takes their hats off. Everybody does a good job of putting their hand over their heart. And it's a great scene to see. And right up here is the big Jumbotron. And unfortunately, the one game that I took Catherine or Caitlin to, she had this great big sign and we all miss it, but she happened to be on the Jumbotron.
Wow.
Team entering, they always come to the one end. Of course, they've got two large banners, Skull and Vikings. And this is what I showed last time. Oh, I had her throw a little humor in. 2 years ago when I was done. Warning, trespassers will be shot, stomped, violated, strangled, mutilated, kicked, beaten, boiled alive. Leftovers will be fed to the dogs. And what was interesting about this, there was a guy from Brazil with me. Is that really going to happen? Go Vikes. These are some shots I had last week, but enjoy and we will have a great season next year. Skol!